I'm excited to talk to you about what we're going to do together to help more people get meditation.
Yeah, me too. It's so exciting.
So, with Aware Meditation and Piece of Peace, we're going to start collaborating to bring mass group teachings to those marginalized groups, those unrepresented groups who don't get the wellness that a lot of people can. And we want to do it in large, large teachings. So, I'm delighted that you're going to start this inaugural process to bring more people specifically to a self-sufficient technique. We want people to be learning a practice that they don't have to keep coming back to the teacher or become reliant. So I was really curious how you even learned the meditation practice in the first place. Why did you come to learn Vedic meditation?
Yeah, wonderful. Great question. So I came to Vedic meditation almost 10 years now ago, and it was after my freshman year of college. And so for me, I was really struggling that year. Probably since my senior year in high school, I started to take a really downward spiral into depression. I had had performance anxiety my whole life. Since I was pretty much 11 years old, I used to vomit before I used to play soccer games.
Oh no! Oh.
Yeah, I would always have kind of that jitter was just like really intense into full blown anxiety for me. And then I continued playing though all the way through to Villanova. And once I got there, and it was just like your whole life as a college student athlete. And so that anxiety turned into full on panic attacks, full on depression. And I was just in my lowest state. I was having suicidal thoughts and just really in a low place. And so for me, I told my mom that year that when I came home for the summer that I wanted to learn meditation and I wanted to box. And so those are the things that basically when I was really sad, I would Google like what's going on with me, how can I make myself feel better? And that's what immediately came up on almost every blog or website. It always said meditation will help you. So
So it's
she
like for
actually,
meditation for the mind and then boxing for the body, right? Mind and body, yeah?
yeah, exactly. And it was just, I'd always kind of just been a little bit interested in them both, but never looked into them at all. So I decided, this year I really needed to change something in my life. And so I was actually going to a mindfulness meditation every weekend. And I was about in week 5 when the Friday before, me and my sister and my mom went down to Venice where I met Christian, my teacher, for Vedic meditation. And I sat in on his intro talk. And from there, it immediately was just like, okay, this is a practice I'm going to stick to. And the self sufficiency was so important for me because it was something that I needed to be able to have something that I could take and continue on my own and grow with the practice without having someone there slowly introducing me to it every single week. And so I think that's really what made me really continue that practice was the fact that by the end of the 4 days, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I just had to then go and do it. And so that's really what got me started on Vedic meditation.
And did you notice that they made a huge difference straight away, or did it take a while?
Yeah. So for me, the first thing that I felt when I was in meditation was just this little bit of peace that I was going to be okay. And it was just like when you're depressed, you have just a million thoughts telling you that you're not good enough, that, everything's not living up to the way it should be, things are turning out worse than they should, and just these negative feelings all the time. And for me, when I meditated, it was this like little bit of time twice daily that I got to feel that it was temporary and that there was a greater truth than all of those negative thoughts. And
And
so
that's
for
go ahead, sorry.
Oh, no, you're good. That for me was the big turning. Like, it took a while before the panic attacks actually faded, and that I started getting more relief from anxiety, and the thoughts started to calm down. Those took a lot more time. But for me, I felt that initial sense that like there was a different truth than what I was experiencing.
So you weren't getting those benefits by doing the mindfulness classes.
Yeah, I think I was doing them, but I was going through the motions for me. It was more like I close my eyes, I'm listening to the teacher, or I'm sitting at home and I'm visualizing this candle that's going and growing. And I was doing it, but at the end, I would mostly just like have this focused mind. And then at the end, I was pretty much just patting my back, like, you tried something today. And it was really just that kind of like, good for you, you're not giving up. And so it wasn't until I was in Vedic meditation where I felt that there was some other truth that I could gain from this practice.
And so you think that it will make a big difference to communities that can't get the in-person instruction now with what we're going to do together? What do you think was the reason why you sort of jumped at the call when I put out a note to a bunch of Vedic meditation teachers that you wanted to be part of this?
Well, for me, it just really resonated with pretty much everything I've always been kind of trying to do with my life. I mean, I've always been really trying to make sure that everyone has access to mental health services, especially because that hit home. But I grew up in a very wealthy area, and I had access to a lot of different resources. And it was a huge help for me, the fact that I knew that my parents were going to pay for me to have that service, and they did. And because if I didn't have them and that other resource, I wouldn't have been able to afford it at the time. I wouldn't have had access. And I grew up always wondering why, in our bubble that I lived in of Palos Verdes, of why was my family the only family of color that was there and had these access to things. And when I went off, and I just felt like there had to be a way for some of the blessings that I've had in my life to be able to be shared and spread, and shouldn't be limited just because of either your race or your economic level, and all of the different things that just systemically hinder us. And I just feel like, especially when it comes to people's health or mental health, that those things have to be able to be shared with others, and be widely accessible. So that's why I really just gravitated toward this, because it's just something that I'm really passionate about, that I think needs to be seen in the world.
What's important about doing this is people will feel comfortable learning within their community, right? And did you feel at all uncomfortable because when you were learning, you were in an environment that was pretty much affluent or Caucasian, that you didn't see yourself reflected in any other teachers or even in the class?
Well, I definitely think that growing up in the neighborhood that I did, I was used to being and having access to areas where there weren't people who looked like me always in those areas. But I mean, it definitely influenced how often, I would attend a group meditation or not, because different things experiences that people said didn't necessarily resonate with my experience. So I definitely think that played a role in why I think it's important to have a more diverse group of both students and teachers. But going off of that, I wanted to hear a little bit more about why you decided to start Aware, and what were some of your reasons? Because I mean, obviously we just went over some of mine, so I'd love to hear more about why you wanted to bring this to life.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, when I came to the meditation, like you, I didn't come to it because I was naturally looking for wellness and, oh, yes, meditation. No, I came through adversity as well. I was hurt from working on the job and living in physical pain with a muscular response to overworking on a computer and filing. And it wasn't just my wrist, it was the whole neck and back. And Western medicine was primarily saying, well, what we can do right now is give you pain pills for the rest of your life. And I was way too young for that. And I was also in a position where I was on disability. I couldn't afford, not from lack of trying, the capability to learn meditation. And so when I did learn it from an individual, ironically, it was in an African American neighborhood that I found myself taking a course, and I sat next to someone who was paying the same dollar amount as me, and yet they were making, a lot of money per week. And I thought, how are we actually giving the same give to learn this practice? And if I was to ever, I mean, it seemed like a random thought, well, if I was ever to teach this, I would do it differently. I would make sure there was either a sliding scale or it took an ability to have some exchange for learning. And so the meditation, I didn't think it was going to work for me. So, like you, I tried other forms and it was horrible. And I used to sleep for 3 hours every afternoon because I couldn't sleep at night. I lived in chronic pain, and you can't sleep when you live in chronic pain. And so in the afternoon, I would just crash. And so the first day I tried it on my own and I sat there and I followed the instructions. I was so sure it wasn't going to work that I followed the teacher's instructions. And I lay down for my nap afterwards because I thought, oh, that's not meditation. There's no way that's going to work. But within that 5 to 10 minutes, my body was telling me, we don't need to go to sleep. And so I sat up, and suddenly I now had, I'd done 20 minutes in the morning with a teacher, and then it was 20 minutes on my own in the afternoon. Rather than 3 hours of being asleep, if we take those two 20-minute meditations, I now got 2 hours and 20 minutes where I was awake. And so I knew I needed to go back the next day. And the profound difference that it made for me, I was very, very aware during my whole process of meditating or wanting to become a teacher, how I was surrounded by so much affluence, right? And I was in a position where, money for medical costs was not covered by insurance. And I was trying to find another way. And I was too young. I was like, I'm too young for this. And so I was very much wanting to, when I became a teacher, wanting to help people who couldn't really afford it, find a way to help people have that give to learn meditation, but also understand the give comes from within. And only if anyone has gone through a real hard time in their life like I was always concerned that I was going to be the person pushing the shopping cart at any moment, because the disability ran out, but then if you don't work, you can't get it again. And you're in a whole system with doctors who are not necessarily there to help you get well. It's a system to get you through it. And then you're thrown out to the wild. That I wanted to always be able to provide a deeper understanding and empathy for all people to get well, right? All of us, not a certain level. And that originally was how I started teaching. And through that, people always said, "Oh, you don't want to do a nonprofit?" And I always thought, "Yeah, I do. I kind of do." And I wanted to find a way to do it on a massive scale. It's moving forward, and this is really filling what we call like the need of the time. That I had already been starting to do movement on this, and people thought I was maybe a little like, "Why would you do that?"
That's great.
Because I always teach in a very down-to-earth, real way. Like, I was in so much physical pain. I was unable to work. I could hardly dress myself. And I had no relatedness of the people around me, yet the people that I teach come from areas where they've either struggled, whether because they're marginalized or because they've been in physical pain or they're transitioning out of incarceration. And I thought there's got to be a way that I can affect more people on a larger scale to help people become self-sufficient. right? That going in and doing a quick fix is not going to really work. And this seems to be the time that it's bubbling forward. And it's going to be occurring more and more. I still have my own, practice with Aware, but I really am having for sure that listening of large groups of people learning meditation and being supported for a lifetime by teachers on a practice that's self-sufficient. And if we had, just maybe 1% or up to 10% in those communities, not only respecting meditation, but actually doing it, it would change the consciousness. It would change so much because the world is full of fear, and it is on the media every day. Whether it's fear that someone's not a certain size, whether it's fear that they're going to die. How do we dispel those fears so people can discern? People can really start listening and moving towards a whole world of self-sufficiency. And so that seems to be moving. And I'm going to just keep going and hearing the call to do that. And we're going to see what happens.